Okay, looks like recording has started. So good afternoon, everyone. It's 3:35 p.m. I'm calling this meeting of the Maple Broadband Executive Committee to order for September 19th, 2024. So the first item on the agenda is to approve the agenda. You've all had a chance to review it. And thank you, Jeff. Second. Second, Shannon. Any discussion?
Nope.
All right. All in favor of approving the agenda as distributed, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Great, that's all of you. Next up is approval of the minutes from August 29th. So you've all had a chance to review those.
So moved.
Second.
All right, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the minutes, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Great, thank you. We've approved the minutes. Next up is public comments. Would anyone like to make a public comment? Nope. Okay, executive director report. So my focus for the next couple of weeks, the punchline is we still haven't seen a RFA for the BEAD program. I'm sure that Steve or I will mail it to you as soon as we're aware that it comes out. There's still no RFA for the BEAD program. What I have been doing is I've been working quite hard on starting to work on the 2025 budget. So I did the good news is it's easy to do a pro forma when you essentially do a pro forma every single month as part of the dashboard, but I have it into the right format now. And I'm most of the way through proposing a 2025 operational budget, which I'm going to send out to you folks first, because the capital budget's going to be delayed a little bit, but it's easier if we chunk it out, I think. And on the capital budget side, I now have almost everything that I need to be able to do my analysis there. So we have a high-level design from JSI, which we're still tweaking a little bit, but it's going to be directionally what we need. And I've been working with Noah, you guys will recall, as our summer intern. Noah has been working with some GIS software to be able to make it so that essentially I can draw my polygons in the GIS software and it will spit out the numbers that I need as the input for the business plan, which is really fantastic because then I don't need to rely on any third-party people. I just need to be able to take the time myself to go and draw out, here's the plan for this area. And then from there, I can generate the numbers that'll generate an accurate plan. So this is pretty exciting for me. So so Noah's doing some stuff, and he promised he would get that to me by end of day today so that I could maybe get started tomorrow, but mostly I have blocked off most of Tuesday to be able to make good progress on that. So yeah, there's a couple of other things. I'm still working with London Middlebury on the marketing bit, and I have a presentation on that later that I sent around and then I'll share. So I think those are really my focus is around the budgets, the budgetary preparation, all that planning that's been pending for a very long time, and I'm now excited to get into the weeds on it. I'm very, very excited. And then waiting with great anticipation for the BEAD RFA to drop when I will probably drop everything and read that to be able to see what questions it answers and what questions are urgent to put in for clarification to the VCBB. The other thing, speaking of VCBB, is I can't recall if I discussed this previously, but I'm communicating with the VCBB just around some of the legal technical details of our grant, because the grant agreement we signed basically says we're going to build this many miles, this many passings, and if we have any money left over, we'll return it to the state of Vermont. And I don't think that's actually what they mean, but the grant needs to be amended to allow us to continue to build, and we need to understand the detailed rules around what we can and can't do, because I'm sure they're not going to punish us for being under budget, and Jeff, you weren't here at the time, and neither was Shannon, but the whole origin of this is that the VCBB came up with allocations for CUDs based on unserved road miles. So our grant is basically our allocation, less what we supported Waitsfield in their grant. So the money should not turn into a pumpkin, but we just need to make sure that we're not literally in breach of contract by building things in excess of the miles and passings that we are contractually agreed. So a small but important detail. So that's it from my report. Does anyone have any comments, questions, concerns? I guess I didn't say, but I'm still working with Sai on trying to finish up the audit, but we'll get to that when Sai has her time. Okay, Well, hearing none, we can move on. We'll skip over the chair report and let Steve do it when he gets here. So the first item under section 6 is the audit and treasurer updates, and Sai has a couple of administrative motions that she sent to Steve and has now sent to Carl in relation to that. So, Sai, over to you.
Check your email, Carl. I fired them over to you. Essentially, part of the audit, we talked with Bonnie last week about a bunch of things, and one of the issues that had come up along the way was documentation of any increase to the executive director's salary and or benefits and approval of same. And we had lots of emails that everyone sort of got and everyone agreed to, but there was never a motion presented or made to the executive committee to approve officially their recommendations, even though they have already been essentially enacted. So what I told Bonnie we would do was to make the motions for this year and the previous year, so they would at least be in the record, and forward them along to her once the minutes come out and we've got approval, so that she can cross that off the list of things to put in her take us to task letter. I want to keep that letter as short as I possibly can. So, Carl, I don't know if you've got your email that I just sent you.
Just this second. Oh, there it is. Okay.
So as you can see, there's a motion for approving changes that would be made effective the first payroll of October 23, and there's a similar one for changes made effective 1st of October or thereabouts 24. So we need to make those motions, or you do,
Okay.
and let the executive committee have at them.
All right. So I'll start with the first one then. I move that the executive committee approve the executive director's current annual wage by 8% effective with the first payroll in October 2023, and to maintain the current benefits package, which includes family health and dental insurance, paid time off, and 5304 simple IRA pension. Is there
Second.
a second?
Second.
Discussion?
I'm unable to vote on this. I was not a member at the time.
Then I think we don't have quorum for it.
Well, I
we can
think
still
Jeff can
vote.
abstain, but you've got your quorum for voting.
Yeah, you have quorum and a majority. Yeah, two of three can vote.
Well, I vote affirmative. And so there's 2. That's a majority. So move.
Okay, so you've moved, Shannon seconded. So I suppose you could formally. Are you both voting affirmatively?
I am.
All right, and Jeff is abstaining. And Sai, could I ask that you please send me the thing as well, because the audio is not great on Carl, and I want to get it properly to Sharon for the minutes.
Yep.
Okay, so Carl, please move ahead with the second motion.
Sure. I move that the executive committee approve the executive director's current annual wage by 7% effective with the first payroll in October 2024, and to maintain the current benefits package, which includes family health and dental insurance, paid time off, and 5304 simple IRA pension.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor of that motion, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and that's unanimous. Thank you.
It.
The ayes have it. Thank you, Carl. And just an editorial comment. This isn't just an audit thing, but it's actually a statutory requirement that public employees changes to compensation need to be voted in public session. You can have an executive session to talk about it, but the decision needs to be public. So, okay. Thank you for that.
Okay. Good. I'll send those to you in 1 second, Ellie, when I see. Oh, so the other quick update on the audit. that was housekeeping. We're still trying to finish the details of the pesky capitalized assets, creeping ever close to it. And Bonnie and Ellie and I have been through lots of numbers and previous audit financials, and I think we're within spitting distance, and should be able to get that to Bonnie and be able to clean this thing up so that she can get something back to us, hopefully at least a first draft next week, which would be nice because all of the other stuff is done finito and in good shape. The treasurer update for any of you who are not at the governing board meeting is that we have, or we will have as of the 1st of November, a new treasurer. Jeff Glassberg, I bow down to you for
Oh, stop.
jumping into the street and bringing this in front of Lynn. We had a great conversation, and it was nice to re-meet her. We have a CV that we will bring or get out to the governing board, and then in their October meeting, we'll be able to officially appoint her to take effect as of the 1st of November, assuming that everyone is good with that, and I humbly hope that they are. Oh, yes. And I'm not sure I have any, what have I missed, Ellie? I think that's pretty much the audit and treasurer update.
I think you wanted another another motion on my time spent last year,
Oh.
because time tracking is another thing that we didn't want to black mark because of lack of time tracking. It's a go ahead, Si.
Yes. And we do need to say out loud that we believe that Ellie is spending her time in an appropriate manner. And Ellie has sent documentation about the every 12 minutes she spends on everything. And is obviously filling out all of her obligations to us in I think, in an entirely appropriate manner. What we will do moving forward that our auditor recommended, although technically I don't know that she's supposed to recommend things, but essentially to track the time with more care paid to how time aligns to our grants, because we need to be able to mark off the time based on what we've said we were going to spend and how much time would be involved. So essentially, hi, Steve, I'm glad you're back.
And by the way, Si, that recommendation a few days after Bonnie made it was also made by Barry Dunn as part of our BEAD capacity
That's
grant.
right.
So
Yes.
we're getting it from all sides. So I have a document that I need to read that outlines best practices, and then I'll figure out how to start, because I do track my time, but I don't track it by grants. So I need to figure out what I should be doing and start doing it.
Ellie, are you the only person who needs to track time?
Yes. Well, yes. She's the only one being paid by the grants per
If
se.
you have match requirements, your time might help.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. I don't tightly track my. It's fine. It's fine as long as it's not a heavy obligation. That's no problem.
Yeah, I think that the in-kind, it might be a bit messy, with people who are paid stipends also trying to track, because then how do you value, right? So I'm sincerely hoping that the difference between hitting our match and not hitting our match isn't hinging on Steve's time, Steve's in-kind contribution.
I think when we did our USDA grant and looked for a match, they were very interested in how much volunteer time. So people were tracking their time for that so that we could apply that as a match against that grant. So Steve, we probably just need you to make a motion that we officially approve of the amount of time and the way the executive director has spent it.
In 2020, this is for 2023 to be specific. So Jeff is going to have to abstain again.
So you sent me two motions that you wanted me to make. Are that's what you're referring to?
No. We've already taken care of them. I sent them to your co-chair, your executive chair, your vice chair. That's what he is, vice chair, who made the motions, and they've been approved.
Oh, all right. So all that I memorized it and everything. Oh, boy. Okay. Well, as long as it's done. Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else for Cy?
You're gonna get your life back.
Sorry.
Thank you,
Yeah. Sorry.
Cy.
We need to do that motion.
Okay.
And Steve,
Refresh me.
we need just a motion from you about approving the executive director's time in the course of 2023.
Yeah. To
I make a
certify.
motion
Yeah.
to the executive committee that we approve the labor hours that our executive director has dedicated to her work scope for the year 2024.
2023.
Yep, that's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thanks for Shannon. Discussion? All in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for helping us with those bits of audit admin. Okay. Next on the agenda is Maple Broadband Executive Director feedback. So I sent you guys a document as part of the pack on Tuesday, which is a response to your request, and then an unsolicited volley back that came out of the discussion that Cy and I had talking about audit and time tracking and whatnot.
I do have a comment about that, Ellie, and I had the document and I must have misplaced it. It'll take me a minute to find it again.
Would you like me to open it?
It'll be easier for me to find the part. Actually, I'm going to do it from memory, and I know Ellie will keep me honest here. There's two parts to it. The first thing is that when we first got started 2 or 3 years ago, our goal was to get 500 subscribers, which hypothetically was going to enable us access to the municipal bond market. Since that time, the environment, our environment has changed, and as ours in the United States, there's just a lot of this going on. It doesn't look right anymore. Maybe a municipal bond isn't the answer for it. Maybe it is. And so in your document, I think your target was 650 subscribers.
750.
750,
and that,
I think.
and the reason for that is, if you recall, some months back, I did a break-even analysis of how many subscribers we need in order to have operational break-even. It was about 625 at the time. I haven't recalculated it, which I will do now as part of the 2025 budgeting process. But what we do know is that my compensation, and in particular the cost of medical insurance, just went up, and we are looking at other options to switch from Blue Cross to bring that back down a little bit. But regardless, we need to, I'd like to be conservative in the planning. So my thinking was that if we needed 625 subscribers to break even before, we maybe need 675 now. So let's aim to healthily exceed that by the end of next year, because I think that's a good milestone for us to be working towards in terms of financial health, is operating break even. So it has nothing to do with financing and everything to do with making sure that we're a sustainable organization.
Yeah, and when I spoke with London Middlebury, they gave me a number of 600. That was like 2 weeks ago. So is it just, it's kind of a moving target from your perspective?
Well, I think maybe it depends on the definition of how aggressive you want to be with your goals. I think it's a reasonable goal to get to, because we're at 443 today. I think that we should easily be able to, I think I wrote like meet or exceed 750 active customers. I really hope we can do that by the end of next year. And the target we had at the beginning of this year, based on last year's financial model, was to have 600 subscribers at the end of this year. We're behind that, as we know, partly because of the realities of people with buried service and people canceling because it takes too long to get them service and whatnot. And so, but that number they got from the original marketing action plan we had with Pivot, and I said, well, why not? Like, let's keep it as a target. I don't think we're going to hit the 600. That was our target a year ago, is to have 600 by the end of this year. So it's two different time frames and two different levels of aggressiveness. It's good for marketing to have a stretch goal that you don't hit, but if we're talking about goals for the organization, there should be realistic goals. So I think hopefully we can smash 750 by the end of year next year.
I think that's achievable. The only other item, and again, I'm working from memory, is you had a page, at least better part of a page dedicated to discussion about I think it was exclusively the executive committee, but it might have also been the governing board. And I don't really disagree with anything in there, but I also think that I don't think we're going to do anything about it. I think it's a kind of an actionable list of things to do, and I don't know what we're going to do about it. In other words, are we going to take action on it? How are we going to do it? Who's going to take the reins of this and start digging into it? Because it seemed to me, like, for example, from my perspective, that's not my cup of tea. I don't want to do that. It's not something that's going to work for me. I don't even know that we've got an executive committee member that would be willing to take it on. I don't know what would be involved with it. Well, sigh.
I've done them before. Much more complicated sort of employee handbook, blah, 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 that go on for pages and pages and pages and pages and miles and reams. I think it would be a fairly straightforward document to at least have some basic, here's what's acceptable behavior, here's what isn't acceptable behavior, yada, yada, yada. When reviews are done, when you get your paycheck, that kind of basic outline for a personnel document. And I'm happy to take a swipe at that. And Jeff, I'm sure you've seen these things, and Shannon, you have too. And there's a lot of reasonably boilerplate information that will serve the purpose that we need to serve. The details that you asked beyond that, Ellie, are the great questions of every single nonprofit organization in the world. And that's, where and how do the board and the executive director meet, greet, and or stay far, far away from one another? Those are trickier questions, and I don't think need to be part of a document that is the personnel guideline, as it were.
No.
But having something that sort of says, I think that that's possible, and I'm willing to take a swipe at that as well, only because I've had to do that before on other boards. Or Shannon, do you have stuff already?
Well, yes, I stole from Adam, and basically for ACRPC, we rewrote the employee handbook about 5 years ago. And so I shared a copy of that with Ellie earlier this week. It's at least a starting place where we can look at it, because the governance is similar. We may reject a bunch of it or change a bunch of it and make it more appropriate, but at least instead of starting from scratch, there's something to play with.
That's great. Is there a chance I could get Shannon, Jeff, and Cy to get together on a subcommittee and no deadline at all, put together a draft and work your way through, sort it out to your satisfaction, and get it back to us?
I'm willing to do that.
Okay. Jeff, would you be willing to contribute? You're muted.
You're on mute, Jeff.
Sorry, I am. And what I'd like to also suggest, because the preface to this in Ellie's written response indicates, there could be more employees. I think we may want to, at least initially, limit our scope to the executive director and cross the bridge of employees, which I really hope not subsequently, but that will keep this more streamlined.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, because like summer interns is one thing, but the way I'm structuring with Noah, who's working hourly, it's going to be a contractor agreement. So, and that's perfectly in line with current job description. Is everyone's contractor? It's not like he's part-time staff or anything like that. So, my goal remains, I mean, I was just describing this earlier today. I mean, I really view Maple Broadband as it's a it's a couple year infrastructure build project, and then it's going to decrease to oversights and supervision and maintenance and so on. So I don't, if we're able to make it through the next year or year and a half with no additional staff, I can't see any reason why we need to add more staff in the future.
Mhm.
And simplicity is a good thing. So we can bring on resources, not necessarily bringing on staff.
Excellent. Great.
And then just as a non-substantive, pedantic kind of thing, on the second page, goals for coming year, first paragraph, fifth line down, the fifth word, achieving, is misspelled.
Oh my gosh.
Sorry.
Otherwise, it was perfect.
Sorry, which paragraph is that?
Goals for coming year, that very first paragraph that begins Maple Broadband is approaching.
Yep.
If you go down 5 lines, by the notion of achieving universal service.
Oh my gosh, achieving. How do
Yeah.
you like that? It's weird that Microsoft didn't catch that. Maybe achieving is actually a word, and we've learned something. Thank you for that, Shannon. And I actually realized after I sent this out that I failed in one of the cardinal guidelines of SMART goals, which is to make them time bound. Because I'd sort of been doing this as by the end of the year, but some of them could be achievable sooner, and I should probably go back and say and put more specific timeframes on some of these things. So thank you for the exercise. It was actually good to take a step back and think about what are some of these broad goals. And if you guys have any feedback on them, I may well have missed some things. And so if you have any feedback, I'd love to hear it. But it's nice to be able to have something like this to pin up and check back on periodically to make sure I'm doing the things that seem to be important and strategic. I mean, they're all somewhat obvious. It's like, yes, these are the things we're doing, but and categorizing them and quantifying them. Jeff, you're on mute again.
Thank you. I have a question under minimized debt service incurred by the district. I think it's the fourth key result. Obtain private funding necessary to build areas not eligible under any grants. Is that to build financially viable areas not eligible under any grants, or is that part of a mandate and now we have to figure out how to carry that cost? How does that work?
I wouldn't say it's a mandate. It's more of a choice that the not sure if it's executive committee or governing board, but for a very long time we have been saying our mission is to get fiber to to make sure that every address in Addison County has access to fiber. And so there's a number of areas that have access only to Comcast right now. And some of those are going to be more financially viable than others. The ones that have aerial service are going to be probably net positive, and the ones that are buried are going to be net negative. But that's my understanding of what we have communicated publicly we'll be doing. So of course our main mission is to make sure people who don't even have access to any sort of broadband get access to something. But we want to make sure that people are not left behind in terms of fiber. But that's a policy decision that could be changed by the board at any time.
Ellie, I thought that, excuse me. I thought that was a condition of the grants that we got from VCBB.
Nope. Their only condition is that if someone doesn't have service, so we need to make sure that everyone has. So the Act 71 grant is everyone needs to have 25.3 or greater, and then BEAD is everyone needs to have 120 or greater. So if you have Comcast, no matter what they're charging you and no matter what speeds you're actually getting, you're considered to be served under these grants. You're not eligible for us to build you. Unless we have to build past you, in which case under Act 71, we're allowed to build to you. And under BEAD, we're allowed to build past you, which is probably 90% of the cost. And then we go put up distribution fiber separately.
So yeah, Comcast is coaxial cable. Part of their network, I'm sure, is fiber because they need to get that bandwidth a little closer to the subscribers. But ultimately, they're kind of hemmed in. That's what Shannon's challenge is. He's got pretty good download, but you might have struggles when you get on a conference call like this, right? Yeah.
And also the price, that where Comcast has no competition.
Exactly.
So.
And terrible service.
Yeah. So we do have the town ARPA and the town ARPA match, of which we have, I don't know what, like 650,000 or so left. So that'll cover some of it, but there's a non-zero amount, and I'll be able to answer better what that amount is in a couple of weeks. Steve, you missed the executive director report. You can go back and listen, but the punchline is that I now have almost everything I need to start doing the analysis of what the different areas are that are left to build and how much they're going to cost and what pot of money we can use, which is the analysis I've been waiting for months and months. So I'm so excited to dig into it.
Excellent.
Okay. Anything else on this, or can we move on?
Move on.
Okay. All right. So Steve, you'd requested that I add 2024 ethics and conflict of interest changes to the agenda.
Yep. Yeah. And you and I have been attending the same meeting. It was kind of a follow-up to this, and maybe it's not much to talk about yet. It is to me potentially very worrisome, because if depending on the severity of what we're going to expect of us, I think we may lose a lot of volunteers because they're going to be obligated to do things that just are kind of onerous, in my opinion. So, but at least one person, FX Flynn, the EC Fiber chair, he thinks it doesn't apply to us at all. so we've got Bakuda is engaging an attorney to review the law and see what to do about it, what we need to adhere to, and maybe what we don't need to adhere to. How did I do, Ellie?
Yeah, I think that's good, except for that you missed the background, which is that last year the legislature passed a law, which is a municipal code of ethics. And I encountered this one. I wasn't paying close attention, but I encountered this when I was looking on the VLCT website, and I raised it in the Vakuda forum to say, hey, what's this thing and does it apply to us? And I was trying to get Vakuda to pass a conflict of interest policy last year, and it got stuck in the weeds because I won't get into it. But anyway, so my question was, if this thing applies, do we still need to do this? What do we think? And this then led to the question of, well, does it apply to us at all? I don't know. So Vakuda is engaging counsel to come up with an opinion, but if it does apply, I think the most onerous thing is that it requires not only officers but all public servants, which would include governing board members, to annually disclose any conflicts they might have in writing. And obviously the usual things around recusal apply. But I think that's really, because we have a conflict of interest policy as Maple now. I haven't perused this law in great detail to figure out exactly what it says and what it might require other than what we do, but that is the one thing that pops out. And you guys all serve on other nonprofit boards. It's not that unusual to sign an annual disclosure of any other things that you do that might potentially pose a conflict.
This came up a year or two ago. Ross raised it, and at the time, my response was, it just adds complexity, and we're kind of keeping it simple. And I did get Magna Dodge at the time saying, you're really probably, it's a good explanation for why you're not doing it, but maybe you need to do it and assign someone. Then it becomes someone that would need to manage the process, which is just one more task that we'd be putting on Ellie. And again, I hate that kind of thing. So anyhow,
or vice chair or something. I mean, it's a task. So, but anyway, I think it's good to raise this here for awareness. So we'll see where the Vakuda legal opinion comes up.
Adam, is ACRPC doing something similar now? Is there an annual?
Yes, and it's a thankless task. And honestly, I asked 4 or 5 different times and probably got about half back. So I don't wish that upon Ellie. I think it's enough if you include it in your policies and then basically make sure you trot it out there and have everybody adopt it once a year or something of that nature. But
Yeah.
getting signed agreements back from every volunteer every year is, well, it's a nice idea. It's not in my opinion, not very practical.
Yeah, I mean it's a different thing if it's staff members who work for towns, which is what its real intent is. So I think it's another case of where possibly the law was drafted overly broadly in a way that doesn't really respect what a CUD is, and possibly it wasn't. So anyway, let's wait and see what the lawyers say, whether or not it even applies, and if it does, then we'll figure out what that means.
I can tell you that for the city of Virgins, if you're sitting on the DRB or the Planning Commission or the Energy Committee, that you have to abide by the council adopted conflict of interest policy. We're not required to sign anything, but again, as Adam says, it's brought out, you're made aware of it, and if you're in violation of it, then they can take action.
Yep. Okay, anything else on this? Okay, property insurance. I added this to the list because I got the quote for our property insurance literally the day before it was due, and so I had to sign it, or otherwise we would have had a lapse in insurance. But it was actually over the amount that I'm able to procure, either by myself or with another purchasing agent, and it was actually less this year. I think possibly because we had less inventory and or the amount that I put down for projected contracted services was less. But either way, in 2023 it was $11,932. In 2024 it's $10,487. So it's about $1,400 less. So I'm not sure what I can't recall what the policy says. If you guys want to take a formal vote, or if you just want to record in the minutes that I've informed you that I did that and requested forgiveness.
Yeah, there's two parts to it, I think, based on what you and I talked about. You caught this when it came up, and needed to be acted upon right away. She said, I thought it was okay to me, and I said, yeah, it's okay with me. I think what we might do, if it's okay with the executive committee, is I could make a motion now to approve it, but I also think there's a part two to this, which is that everything we've done to date via insurance has only been, it hasn't put out the bid or anything like that. And we kind of got what we ended up with because of a need for umbrella insurance, which was harder to come by. And so at the time we scratched and we found the insurance that we needed to make sure that Arizona omissions insurance was covered. So it's all covered, but there was no competition involved in it at all. So I think the big question is, should we undertake some kind of a competitive effort to do this, just to kind of make sure everything's square? Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Yes, I think that's best practice. I'm not sure how specialized our coverage is. I anticipate this may be another opportunity to work with our collegial organizations around the state or through Vacuda as a buying co-op for insurance, but it would be best practice to make sure we're competitively procuring it.
Maybe the challenge I faced, I was the one who pretty much had to organize all the insurance at the beginning, and that was BE before Ellie, and it was basically I went to a local insurer that Adam had recommended, and I was supremely ignorant. I know nothing about insurance, and I don't want to know anything about insurance. So I just bent his ear and got all of his recommendations I could, did everything I could. And so if we're going to put this out to bid, we need somebody to do this who understands the ins and outs of insurance so that they can know to ask the right questions. And I don't know if that expertise resides in the executive committee. So I guess that's my next question is do we have an expert level person who'd be willing to help craft an RFP?
But it may not be an RFP so much as contacting, multiple agents as sources for competitive quotes. And if we think the coverage we currently have is sufficient, and I'm not sure if this is only property insurance, so we also procure directors and officers coverage, workers' comp, right? We probably have other insurances that we procure.
Yeah, well, this one, yes, workers' comp is obtained through the same entity, Telecom Insurance Group, and then the D&O is, where's it from? Somewhere else.
Richardson, I think.
Yeah, the Richards Group is the
The
broker.
Richards
I can't recall who
yeah.
the insurer
who
is. But
yeah.
that was one I did want. I definitely want to bid that one this year because that one's easy. I mean, like workers' comp and D&O are quite easy, and property insurance is a little more specialized.
Now I gotta get going.
Bye, Carl.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
So
I think it's probably good practice to do that once every. I don't do it every year with the folks that I follow this stuff up on, but probably every 3 years I just go snooping around to make sure that what we're paying is reasonable.
Thank you. I would suggest that as well. So Steve, it doesn't undo approving the renewal of the policy. It suggests that going forward and for all forms of coverage, we should on a regular, approximately 3-year cycle, take our current forms and seek alternative proposals. We don't have to put out an RFP, simply, photocopy what we have and ask for quotes on that from other sources.
Yep.
So Ellie, when are we next due to pay an invoice for insurance? I mean, can we do this? It's been in its current status quo state since the beginning. If we're, for example, due for our next insurance payment in 6 months, could we 5 months from now do that request for quotation effort?
It's an annual agreement, Steve, so I've signed it. So I think that the property insurance, we should start looking, I don't know, about 6-7 months from now. And then, like I said, directors and officers, that one renews, I think, in November. So
I think we tried to get everything to be right around the same October, November space.
Yeah.
So there should be something in like a tickler file 1 month before bills are due to stipulate an RFQ.
Further than that,
we pay an annual premium, so I think next July somebody ought to just take all of our policies and run them up the flagpole with a couple of other insurers and see what you get.
How do we avoid forgetting this?
We tell the next treasurer to keep that in mind.
Yeah. I put it on my to-do list.
I think we can probably actually ask our bookkeeper. She keeps a great tickler file about a lot of things, to just put that in a bookkeeping calendar.
Okay.
Excellent.
Okay. All right. Next item is the parking lot. Is there anything in the parking lot anyone wants to raise? Steve and I have had a flurry of activity around Ripton and Middlebury hubs. We have a meeting with the town of Middlebury next week, Monday, and talking to the Addison Central School District. Carl isn't here, but Matt did get back to us. Thank you to Carl for that. And I haven't heard anything from. I think there was a committee meeting yesterday, and Matt hasn't gotten back to me yet, probably because he's swamped. But I think it's at least moved on from there, because I ran into someone else who works for ACSD earlier today, and she said you're on our upcoming agenda. So that's good news. Things are working through the process, but we don't have any final sites. Steve.
Yeah, and regarding Ripton, Ellie and I are in the enviable position of identifying 2 locations, one of which is kind of already approved, and so we're currently looking at the school location so that we can kind of weigh the benefits of the 2. If we have to do this, if the school doesn't work out, then we go to the fire department, and there is a condition on that related to bat habitat. So we can't, where we would go is heavy forest, lots of woods. It's Ripton. And so I went through kind of a preliminary effort to identify how many trees needed to be removed so that we could put our pad there. And it would be a pretty big sized piece of real estate because the trees there are old growth, they're tall. And so we need to remove any tree that might fall on the shelter. So I did get a kind of a broad quote from the fire department planning on putting a solar array on their roof, and there's some trees in the sight line between the sun and the array, the trees that are too tall. So we had a tree service guy there when I met with him regarding our effort, and I got a quote from him of about $5,000 to take the trees down, remove the trees away. And Ellie found out that because there's 5 endangered bat species in the state, and there needs to be an effort to identify if there's any bat signs of bat habitats in that treed area, and the trees can only be removed November to March. So Ellie and I agreed that in principle, if we end up with the fire department, we're going to want to put out to bid and be ready to move on it, when November comes around. So there's no immediate urgency to it since we don't even know if we're going to go to the fire department. But my plan, just to give you heads up, is I'm going to put together an RFP and I'm going to spend some time marking the trees. We're going to have to change the location a little bit. And then at some point, if we head down that road, then I'll get some competitive quotes. And then when we're clear that we're doing the fire department, I'll reach out to the executive committee and ask for your approval to engage. Any questions there? Thank you.
Okay, anything else on the parking lot?
Not the parking lot, but going back to the insurance, did we need to make the motion to approve?
Yeah. So I make a motion to approve executive director's writing a check to our insurance company for $11,000 to pay to avoid past due invoice. Second. Thanks. Discussion? All in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Okay, thank you. I feel appropriately covered now. Okay. All right, moving on. So the first update under updates is marketing. So I have shared a deck and I'm going to present it on the screen now. I'm not presuming who's read through the deck already. Okay, and I know that Steve has, so Adam hasn't. So let me just run through it quickly for Adam's benefit.
No, that's not true, Ellie. Actually, I did read it.
Okay.
It was quick, but I did read it.
Yeah, it was pretty good. So I think I guess I just wanted to facilitate a discussion around what comments and feedback and questions you guys have, either about any of the recommendations, any of the activities to date, any of the planned activities, or the timeline. That impressed, were you?
So it's a lot of questions all at once, Ellie.
Yep. Well, where do you want to start?
No, I'm serious. Do you want to break that into smaller bites?
Well, let's just go through the deck and see if there's any just take comments or questions by page. I mean, the first thing is the discovery activities. So this is what they've done to date, and they have completed this, and it's essentially an input to the later phases. I mean, discovery is it's a milestone, but it's not really a deliverable, if that makes sense. Anything on this one? Okay. They're continuing to do stakeholder interviews, by the way, with customers. And recent improvements and quick tweaks, some of these were in progress before we brought London Middlebury on. So, for example, they received our first 2 Google reviews. Those are probably from the postcards that we sent out. That was one of the last things Pivot helped us with. And then these automated emails was an existing initiative where they have been fantastic helping us with the software that's going to do the automation. And we have a meeting with Waitsfield next week, Thursday, to make sure that everything's 100% before we pull the trigger. But that wasn't a new strategy they developed. So some of these are their ideas, and like the raffle system at community events is their idea. Switching from stock photos to user-generated content, all of them, it's great. So some of these are there. Some of these are things that we've already started to do, but they've listed them so that we have a nice comprehensive list of changes and improvements that we've made in the last couple of, I guess, month and a half or so, and things that are in progress. So anything on this? Okay. All right. So the phase 2 and phase 3, these were not everyone received the proposal that they submitted for our RFP. So I asked them essentially to pull out from their proposal and put into slides things that those of us who reviewed the RFP were already familiar with, so that you're aware of what they're doing as part of their strategy development. So discovery was the first phase, research is the second phase, and then the synthesis and recommendations that come out of that is what happens in the strategy development phase. So, and these are all, as you can see, the research is in progress. They're doing customer in-depth interviews, competitive analysis. I'm really excited to see this. They're having a look at our website, strengths and weaknesses. So they've already started compiling things and initial findings, but this is very much a work in progress at this point, not ready for sharing. Adam.
Ellie, I have a question.
Yes.
How much of this are we going to share with her partner? Goodness.
Waitsfield? WCVT?
Yes, WCVT.
Well, that's a great question. So Steve sent them this deck, and then I wrote Steve an email saying it's great to send them this deck, but future decks might be more sensitive in terms of what's in there, so let's make sure that we're on the same page before just sharing it. And I'm sure that he had a look at the deck beforehand to make sure of that point, but I just wanted to make sure we were all clear on that. So I think the answer, Adam, is probably more rather than less. And I think that my thinking on this is that part of the value of what they're doing is they're going and speaking to customers, getting voice of customer, and painting and contextualizing a story. And we actually want, we really want them to be able to see what we see and see what our customers see and internalize that. However, the storytelling and making sure that they're coming along is going to be absolutely critical, because what I don't want is I don't want to send a deck which says, all right, we've done all these things and therefore we need these 10 changes and 4 or 5 of them are major changes for Waitsfield, and they see that list and they panic, right? You know, we have to make sure that we've brought them into the process of the why, and that, you know, we respect the fact that I really think this is a cultural change and shift that needs to happen when, you know, when you're the incumbent and it's not in your DNA to be the challenger. It just isn't.
Okay, thank you. I think that's great. I think that was a great answer.
Thank you. Yes. So basically all of it, but we just have to be careful with how we do it. Okay, so this is where we are with the research, and then the strategy development is all of these things that I actually haven't looked at recently. But it's, I mean, the strategy framework is basically your activities. The implementation plan relates to that. And so these are what sort of activities we're doing. Implementation plan is how and on what cadence. The monitoring and evaluation is one of the things that made me the most excited about London Middlebury throughout the engagement process, is that they proactively asked, how are you measuring right now? To which the answer was, we're not. So it's great that they really think in this way, and they do. It's in their DNA. The volunteer engagement program is, and it may be that we discover that this isn't something that we actually want to do. Who knows, right? I mean, open to that. But conceptually, we have people on our governing board who we could potentially use more effectively. This came out in our 360 review that we did of the organization, as well as other people who signed up and expressed interests. And if we had discrete work packages that were interesting and actionable and people could see results. So, you know, I think it's a good thing to explore. I don't want to say guaranteed for sure we're going to do this, because that's sort of, you know, the answer. The answer needs to come from the data that they're collecting and the strategy framework and development. But hopefully, very likely, this will be something that we do. And then community engagement and PR is, I think, pretty straightforward. Customer acquisition and retention also, but this is where it really talks about the customer touch point analysis and the pain points and the friction points and the word of mouth and all of this. I think that this is the part that I'm really particularly interested in. So, comments or questions on this?
What's the time frame for this piece? Oh, there you go. Okay.
There you go. Yeah. Yep. So this is the time frame. I did ask them to be realistic and conservative with their planning. You know, it's always better to under promise and over deliver. So I think this is, hopefully they'll be able to deliver a little bit faster than this, but for our own planning purposes, we shouldn't be expecting something in 2 weeks' time either. And I asked this in particular because it came up with the governing board. When are we going to see the results? Now we can tell the governing board, well, you know, probably in the December meeting, you'll see results. It's unlikely. I mean, we as executive committee, we might see things a little bit sooner than that, but it's good to be able to set expectations. There's a lot of things going on, but there's really a lot of work that's going on here. And you don't just want to jump to an answer, jump to an action plan without having done the steps. That's literally what we're paying for. So I would much rather have it take the time it needs to take and be done properly. And I think my comment is that I'm just really excited to see what they come up with, because all my interactions so far have just been so highly impressive, you know. And I mean, you know, they have shouldn't say they, you know, we collectively have, you know, had a stumble or a dropped ball here and there. But you know, nothing's perfect, and it's just the quality overall is so high. I know I sound like a broken record. So that's that. These green things are survey deployment. You may have already seen on Front Porch Forum, we've started more part of what's going on in the research here is they're interviewing customers, but we're also putting out requests for both quantitative and qualitative feedback. So there's a survey we're going to be distributing and putting that out across all the channels. So our newsletter, our social media, putting in ads in the Addison Independent. I forget, there's a few other things. Front Porch Forum. So just trying to gather as much data as possible, not only from our current customers, but from prospective customers, and trying to understand what people value and what would make them switch or not switch, because it all feeds into how do we get people to buy, and then how do we not drive them away either before, during, or after installation. Okay, so this is an existing customer journey map. I don't think we really need to talk about this, but I think when it's finished, it'll show the different touch points along the customer journey and their analysis of where we're strong and where we need to work. And then, yeah, I was telling you earlier about the automation. So this is the the detail behind the simple concept of let's send out emails at various points along the milestone process, but do it in an automated manner. So it's a little bit of complexity, but okay, and that's it. So anything you guys want to talk about in the marketing world?
I have one idea to pass along based on looking at the updated dashboard. And we didn't have big numbers assumed for telephone service, but we're slightly below what we had forecast. And I'm looking at that as an opportunity to perhaps upsell to existing customers.
Yep.
A relatively inexpensive product. And the idea for today is stop scrolling. You can shut off your phone and still have access in case, of an emergency. But, sort of a new pitch on that, especially for families, I think are struggling, like parents with kids, how do you take your phone out of the picture and expect your kids to learn that as well, and sort of pitching this idea of you're able to shut off at home if you want to.
I like that. And yeah, that idea of trying to upsell customers is something that we talked about in one of the workshops, because I forget if it was their idea or my idea, but it definitely makes sense to, because you want to be acquiring customers, retaining customers, and then within reason making sure that customers are actually buying the maximum bundle of products, which does not mean selling them the most expensive broadband product that you have when they don't actually need it. That is not. We've never done that, and in fact, whenever I'm selling or talking to people, I always do the opposite. I always tell them to get the cheapest service and then upgrade if they need to, because I think that's my view as to how you build loyalty, is, you know, not being seen as predatory. Okay. So if anything occurs on marketing, oh, go ahead, Adam. You want to say something?
I just had a question, I guess. You seem pretty happy with London Middlebury. By all accounts, you think they're doing really well, which is great. And that means a lot. Direct sales would be my question. I didn't necessarily see anything about direct sales in here. I mean, we talk about different marketing, and some of them are more direct, direct mailings and such. But I guess I'm still wondering whether there's any place for direct sales in this sales marketing program.
It wasn't in the deck, but that is one of the things they're researching, Adam.
Okay.
We specifically talked about it in our workshop. Workshop 3, Primary Research Priorities and Objectives. So thank you for raising that again. Okay, anything else? Okay, bead. So I don't really have too many bead updates. This will be a short update. So I gave part of the update earlier, which is to say there's still no RFA. I don't know when there will be. Yeah, so I'm not going to say anything further on that. The one thing I did want to follow up on was was looking based on the minutes of the last meeting. I had a look at Volume 2, and what the current Volume 2, which is the approved cured version, says is different than what I had understood. And I raised this morning in the Vakuda Bead meeting, and everyone else is on the same page. So I'm not sure when it changed. I don't have the access to the original wording. Didn't bother to go look it up. But I had thought I understood that the VCBV would be announcing after the pre-proposal phase, essentially if there was competition in a district or not. And on a new reading of it, that's not going to happen. So they're basically going to say, you know, is there one or more priority broadband proposals or not? And if we're submitting one, then there will be one or more. So we're not going to know if there's 1 or 7 for our district. So it's a little bit disappointing because we were all kind of hoping that we'd know after pre-proposal if there was competition in our district or not. But to be fair, if I was running a grant, I wouldn't want the bidders to know that. So probably the NTIA told them the loophole and what they were doing, and it's since been closed. So not sure. We're gonna have to rely on the gossip mill to tell us if we think we have competition. Steve, you're muted, Steve.
Could you refresh us about RFA and what happens when we receive it? What are the consequences of that in terms of the work we're doing on preparing for BEAD?
Well, when the RFA comes out, that's basically going to be their notice of funding opportunity. So their application requirements form, as well as one has to imagine other program details that aren't described anywhere else. So for example, some of the things in there are going to say they've put in Volume 2 how many points you get for different things. They haven't said how the scoring works. They haven't said, for example, you know, is lowest price, you know, does the lowest price get all whatever 30, 35 points and the second lowest price gets 0, or is there some sort of, you know, gradation of that? So part of what we're going to see in there is the scoring rubric. And what, in relation to that in particular, we're going to go through and say, okay, so if we were submitting an application tomorrow, how would we score? And if we don't know how to answer it based on the information provided, we'll say, you know, we'll give a response on that. There's a bunch of other things in there that we've uncovered in the Vakuda meeting, which are kind of obvious things. Like if the document doesn't talk about pre-award expenditures, we're going to want to suggest that it talk about pre-award expenditures. If it doesn't talk about whether or not, for example, financing costs and interest are an allowable grant expense, because they are allowed under uniform guidance, we're going to want to make sure that that's in there. So things along those lines. So I think there's two categories of review of this thing. The first thing is what's in here that we just don't understand or that we think is perhaps wrong, or I'm not so worried about not being consistent with their volume 2, because from what I understand, the NTIA is doing that consistency check with probably more rigor than anyone would really enjoy. So things that we don't understand, or things that aren't in there that we feel that we would need to know to participate well in the program. And that latter category is the hardest thing. I mean, any of you guys who review legal documents can appreciate that it's much easier to see what's wrong or what challenges you have with what's written than to figure out what's not in there that could bite you. So both of those things. So, I mean, Steve, I think there could be, we won't know until we see it. So I can tell you what I'm going to do when I get it. But then in terms of like how that change, like what that means in the short term, I don't really know.
Is it correct that it comes from the NTIA to the VCBB, and then the VCBB applies their own requirements on top of it? So is it coming from VCBB or NTIA? It's
a VCBB document that the NTIA is approving.
Okay. So I think one of the things that you and I talked about a little bit is, yes, some of the possible constraints that are in there that might be really important to us, we don't know if they're here yet, because I think my worry is less about what NTIA wants and more about what VCBB tries to do to us. But I guess we'll all find out about that together. Okay, thank you.
Yes, indeed. So that's really all I have on BEAD. Not too much. It's still a waiting game. And yeah, I don't really have any other updates. I mean, Vakuda is also sort of in this waiting game for BEAD, not wanting to get to extend itself too much when we know that the BEAD train is coming. Steve, something you want to say?
Well, I've got some other items, and
okay.
The first one might have already been covered. Did you give a report on the number of subscribers we have?
I didn't. Would you like to? I know you have the number too.
443. So it's growing, and it sounds like, based on what's in the pipeline, I think by the time we have our next meeting, we'll definitely go, break 450. It shouldn't be too hard to do. And then the other two items I wanted to ask about, to some degree for my benefit and maybe for the executive committee, is network management agreement. I know as it stands right now, we did receive from our law firm what is intended to be a final draft of the document, which will be next delivered to WCVT for their first exposure to the changes we've made. And as it stands now, I believe it's on your, in fact, I'm sure it's on your desk, Ellie. Do you have any thinking on, it's not something, it's not a walk in the park, so I wouldn't expect you to try to go through it in half an hour. It's going to take you a while to really understand all of it. And the highlights that I put in the draft changes, most of the highlights were more kind of typographical and stuff like that. So if you just look at the green highlights, we're probably going to need to talk about it, but there's really not too much in it that I take exception to. But we should talk about it. I think my basic concern initially about SLA related stuff, we need to talk that through. I think the way it's written right now in there is not, it doesn't make sense to me. So I think you and I will need to talk about that. So, all right. Do you have any sense of when you're going to get around to taking a look at that? I know we have a little more time than we thought we had, so maybe a couple of weeks, or what do you think?
Yeah, I think a couple of weeks. So I covered in my report, my focus right now is basically getting ready for the budget, because that's required under statute, and we have to hit those timeframes because we have the governing board meeting when it's meeting, and I don't want to be giving things to Jeff and Cy like a day before, because that's not fair to them either. So I will be able to answer better when I can see how long the GIS analysis, trying to figure out of what's left to build, which program, is it BEAD, is it not BEAD, is it ARPA eligible? So once I have that done, once I'm into that, I'll have a better sense of how long that's going to take.
are you, in the back of my mind, since I'm always in a hurry, what happens if it takes you a month to get through that?
Oh, it won't. It can't.
Good.
We don't have that much time.
Yeah, that's
I mean,
that's
if it turns out it's going to take a month, I'm going to have to, use other estimates or use approximations or what. But it won't. I mean, it's
okay. Okay.
I yeah, I've done this sort of thing before. The new wizardry that I have, thanks to Noah, is that things that I used to have to calculate manually are now happening automatically. So what previously would take me, I don't know, a couple of days should now be one day. But one day isn't just one day; it's spread over multiple days because you have meetings and other things.
Okay, and then the other item under other was the high level design that JSI, our engineering firm, is working on, and it's in pretty darn good shape. I think the worry that I have, and I'd sure invite your thoughts on it, Ellie, is that we really can't lock down the high level design because it'll inform the detail design, where there's a lot of money they're going to have to spend for that. And we really can't lock down the high level design when we don't know quite where we're going to put our gear. And I think it's kind of, from my perspective, a burning issue. But again, I think it's what we know is that in previous lease/easement negotiations, it took about 24 weeks from commencement of the effort to execution of the agreement. And the Leicester one is kind of an outlier. It's about 10 weeks longer than the previous efforts took. And that includes the Regens hub. So on one side, I worry about the fact that we don't really quite know where we're going to put our hub, but I think I try to remember about the fact that we have time right now, because we're going to, in an ideal world, we're going to put out to bid a detailed design in maybe February or March, and so if it takes us 6 months to get something identified, that's okay. I think my bigger worry is that Ellie's using the high level design as a driver for cost estimates. And if we're way off the mark when it comes to where the hub ends up being located, then it's going to really change a lot of things. Like her material cost, labor cost estimates are going to change. And that's all part of the bid process. We want to make sure we're covering ourselves, but we also don't miss anything. And so it's kind of critical to get it right and get as close to the mark as we can. And I think the sooner we can, I guess it's basically, that's maybe my chair report. That's basically my biggest worry. And I think we're making great progress on it. Ellie's got iron in the fire. Maybe she said this on her executive director report. The Addison School District she's working with them from the Middlebury project. And Ellie and I are meeting with the head of the Department of Public Works, I guess that's what it's called.
Planning, I think.
Yeah, on Monday. And we both have lists of some choices that we have, and we're going to talk with her about it, and we'll see where that goes. But it's definitely, we're not idle about it. But I think it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to get nailed down in the next week or two.
Yep. Steve, the only small correction is we already put out the detailed design to bid. Remember, we awarded it to JSI, but we didn't execute the agreement pending, because we don't want to spend that money until we're awarded bid.
Right. Understood. Yeah, sorry if I misrepresented that. Yeah, I know that the extent of what we've engaged, and also the extent to which the executive committee approved, was this piece. And I think it was a given that we're going to award the detailed design to the same firm, since it'll be the base work product will be theirs. So I think that maybe we'll need to, Ellie, will we need to approve that number, or did we approve everything? Do you recall?
I don't remember, but we'll look closer to the time, because
Okay.
But by the way, since we're speaking about JSI and being happy with firms, I'm very happy with JSI so far. Really, really great engagements, and really good quality and detail in the KMZ as well.
Yeah, one thing that really helped from the perspective of, somebody who didn't have Ellie in the picture and we didn't know what we were doing, we did everything all at once. We did the high level design and the detailed design all at once. And it cost us an arm and a leg because there was a lot of mistakes that we made. And so I think this is really a lessons learned effort. I think, like, for example, Ellie's idea, let's just do the high level design. Let's stop after we've done the high level design and evaluate it and have some conversations before we move on. So thank you. That's all I had.
Great. Thank you, Steve. So does anyone else have any other business? Jeff.
I wanted to acknowledge some updates on the dashboard as of August. So thanks. Subtotals, variances updated through August. The debt assumption that we would take on debt this year removed. So thank you for keeping that current and making those changes.
Thank you. Thank you for the suggestions. Continuous improvement is our goal. Okay, so our next meeting then is, I said this in email, but this is the last sort of irregular meeting with vacations and governing board overlaps. So from next month, we are going to be meeting on the 1st and 3rd Wednesdays. And then the governing board is the 2nd week, and the 4th week is essentially off. So I'm going to update the invite after this, now that today has happened. All right. Someone like to move to adjourn?
So moved.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Yep.
Thank you.
And Ellie, Maddie sent you your minutes, so you
Thank
should
you.
have them in the packet, so they should be all set.
Great.